It was a pleasure to burn. Those are the immortal opening words to the dystopian warning that permeated Fahrenheit 451. As a writer, I abhor censorship of any kind, no matter the words. Those words are hard to say out loud after you find something that seems to be created for no other reason but to play to the author's peccadillo. This mad musing looks at the game famously banned from GenCon back in '82 for bad taste. I'm talking about the infamous Alma Mater RPG. Does the game deserve its bad reputation? Does Harvey Weinstein have a slightly used couch to sell you? I'm Mr. Welch, and we're going back to school. Alma Mater was published in 1982 by Oracle Games Limited, with Steve Davis and Andrew Warden as the authors. Errol Otis famously did a large amount of the art, with Owen Alton getting artistic credits as well. The game is 48 pages and never saw a supplement, making it a one-book wonder and one of the most famous RPGs in its day, for all the wrong reasons as well. A complete copy of the game runs about $300 on various websites, and even copies in poor conditions will still demand at least $50. Note, this is all for collectors. I don't know anybody who actually plays the game. So now that I've been talking about the game's poor reputation for a minute, what makes it a bad game? Because the subject it covers is high school, specifically starting at freshman year high school. In-game, you're looking at players aged 13 to 16 normally, and the game's subject matter focuses heavily on drugs, sex, violence, and similar topics. It's not shoved down your throat like other games, which take the topics way too far, but when you start to comprehend what you're actually playing, that's when you realize the game has a lot of rules for sex and all the characters are jailbait. It's not just the underage sex part. The game is aged like a Bill Cosby milkshake. It's got a very juvenile vibe, as if the entire game was written by Beavis and Butthead. It's that kind of humor. I don't think the authors meant to make the game as creepy as it is today, but shock value is a huge part of the game. It has rules for M16s and other firearms in a game about high school life. The rules for hardcore drug use are surprisingly comprehensive. The worst part is while this game comes off as a teen fantasy from the late 70s or 80s, there's far worse games in the same vein. This is a game that predates Columbine by almost 20 years. I don't think the authors even considered school shootings as a reality when they wrote the rules for shootouts in the school hallways. The game uses 7 different stats that you generate by rolling 7d10 and distributing the rolls where you want. This can lead to some almost unplayable characters if you roll badly enough. They even have a class for people who didn't roll over a 4, the loser class. They're restricted to just a few skills, can't take any skills that would make you friends or change the fact that you're a loser, and of course you can never have sex because no one likes you. I'm not making that up, it's in the rules. Other classes include the brain, the jock, the cheerleader, the tough, the criminal, and if you're purely average, you get to play the average kid. Each of these have specific requirements, except for the average kid. If you want to be a jock, you need a strength of at least 8, 7 coordination, and a 6 appearance, for example. Jocks can only be male, and they have to be above average in appearance, because high school football coaches always judge potential players on their looks. Once you've got all that done, calculate your constitution, which serves as your hit points, and determine your social status. This again is arbitrary. Only students' brains and average kids can come from rich households, which might shock a few cheerleaders or jock kids I grew up with. Once you've got that, see if there's any problems with your character. The more attractive you are, the less of a chance your student is flawed in some way. Ugly kids, those with an appearance of 4 or less, automatically roll on the flaw chart. You can get results anywhere from being too tall, to missing teeth, to being a psychopath, to being badly burned, to being gay, to having a chance to drop dead of a heart attack. Because everybody knows that ugly people have an increased chance of all of those and more. Once you check to see if you're a horribly disfigured freak that no one likes, then you go on to your skills. Most of the skills are automatically assigned to you. Only the average kids get to pick skills. Everything else is mostly determined with no variation. A few classes get 1 free skill that can be anything, but if you want to be a band kid, that has to be one of your free choices if it's allowed. If you want to be in theater, chess club, or the Welch team, sorry, they forgot those skills. Once you figure out your skills, get used to them because you don't get any new skills for another year of game time. You only get to test skills every September, and even then you aren't guaranteed to increase any. Then you head to the charts to determine what a random day is going to be like in your school, or how people will react to your teenager's actions. There are pages of charts in this game, and the game quickly becomes overly complicated for its subject matter. Comedy RPGs, which this game definitely tries to sell itself as, needs to be simple to keep the players interested. Having to go through a chart with 17 modifiers to see if your parents are mad at you is going to get tedious quickly. There's also a long list of potential NPCs with their equipment and skills, and then reaction charts for the same NPCs that take up a quarter of a page. This obviously feels like padding because of the amount of almost pointless charts. You've got a large section on combat, which again feels bloated as the weapon list has over 50 possible things to hurt people with, divided into lethal and non-lethal categories. You can mildly annoy your enemies with a tennis ball, or go full on dead alive by running them over with a lawnmower. You would think that having an assault rifle in a game set in a high school would be in very poor taste, but then you look at the rest of the weapons on the chart and realize that the M16 is pretty tame in comparison. The game was written at a time where blowing up the school was just a lyric in an Alice Cooper song instead of the reality that sadly became later. Yes, it's in bad taste, but there was no malice in it. The one piece of art where the kid is shooting the rifle has him imagining he's Sergeant Rock, and his target is something only in his imagination rather than living creatures. The game has an expansive section on sex and drugs. It's like the only thing the writers paid attention to in high school was the Nancy Reagan Just Say No commercials. They list off a whole host of narcotics, sort many of them by quality, and then give you a chance to overdose. The sex rules run the gamut from asking the girl out to getting into her pants. There's a 20% chance of pregnancy, and keeping a steady girlfriend is going to be quite difficult. This part of the game gets really creepy the second you realize all the characters are going to be under 15. Pedo vibes tend to ruin a game for most people. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the art, because that's what the game's notoriety is largely from. It's classic Errol Otis, and it's unsettling to look at. Most of the characters depicted look like Hollywood teenagers, as in they resemble somebody who's a lot older than supposed to be a 13-year-old, like in their 20s. The art includes graphic violence, lots of uncanny valley, and his depiction of black men assaulting another student in the bathroom is just badly drawn. The cover, oddly enough, features a character that resembles a drugged-out Michael Jackson, though the book was released before Michael Jackson started to look like that. It was a common complaint about the game from what I've read, but the timeline doesn't match up, as Michael Jackson was going full-on Thriller in 1982. The art includes nudity. It includes blood, where a guy is getting his throat cut. It has a graphic depiction of a guy shooting up heroin. And this is 1982. This is the beginning of the Satanic Panic. This is not an RPG that was going to be well received by the people that think we were all going to hell for D&D. I would have to say that the art is a major problem on why this game has such a bad reputation. That does conclude Alma Mater. It's tacky, it's tasteless, it's almost unplayable. But a bit of its poor reputation is people applying the sophomoric humor to today's tastes, which is unfair. Next up, we're headed back to the grimdark darkness of the grimdark 90s with Slay Industries, a game where you're not just the bad guys, you're the bad guys vying for corporate sponsorship. But until next time, go Cougs.